Understanding Cognitive Development and Learning Theories by Kelly Jones. In this presentation, we will be looking at various learning theories, including Jean Piaget, Jerome Bruner, Ian Pavlos, Bruner, and many more. Jean Piaget, a Swiss-born biologist and psychologist, had a great interest in how human intelligence develops, primarily how children develop skills, process information, and use observational skills as they grow from birth to adulthood. Piaget suggested that children categorize the knowledge they amass through experiences and interactions into schemas. When new information is gathered, it can either be assimilated into existing schemas or accommodated by updating an existing schema or creating a new one. After observing the intellectual development of his own children, he devised a 4-stage theory to outline the developmental process. These 4 stages are the sensorimotor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operational stage, and the final stage, formal operation stage. Piaget devised a number of experiments to further explore his constructivist approach to the learning theory. These experiments served to support Piaget's views, although further experiments and theorists have criticised the accuracy of his work. Piaget used object permanence experiment to observe the skill set of the sensorimotor stage. By showing a toy to the child and then hiding the toy under a blanket or behind the back, Piaget was able to observe whether the child believed the toy had disappeared or whether they opted to look for it. The younger infants lost interest in the toy once it was hidden, believing if they cannot see it, it no longer exists. The older infant continued to look for the toy, understanding that it still existed, even though it was not in their sight. At the pre-operational stage, Piaget used a 3-mountain task to observe the egocentrism he believed this stage exhibited. The children were unable to show the doll's or the adult's point of view. They was only able to describe or pick out the picture, showing their very own point of view. Other experiments include using 2 glasses filled with water with the exact amount, and then transferring 1 glass into a different shaped glass and determining whether the child believed the water was still the same, more, or less than the original glass remaining. The pre-operational age group's inability to decenter and think logically strengthened his belief of egocentrism. As the stages continued, the children were able to understand the experiments and logically work out the correct answers. This led to the concrete operational stage and further to the formal operational stage. Other theorists who have similar thoughts in structural development include Jerome Bruner. Jerome Bruner was another structural theorist, although he believed learning is an active process for which learners construct new information and ideas based on current and past knowledge. As a teacher following this theory, you are required to translate information required for the learner's current level of understanding. So by understanding Piaget's cognitive stages, you should not teach a pre-operational child the same information as you would a formal operational age student. Some theorists also devised similar experiments to Piaget, based on his theory of 4 separate stages. Martin Hughes developed a study called the policeman doll study, as he believed children would do better if they understood exactly what was being asked from them. By explaining the characters of the naughty policeman and the doll, the children were able to relate to the doll and were more capable of hiding the doll from the policeman, which proved that they was able to understand more for their supposed cognitive state than Piaget originally thought. Although it does not agree completely with Piaget's exact stages, the theory still supports that children are in stages, but the age range is more advanced. The theory and practice of classical and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is based on an involuntary reflective. Classical conditioning relies on association between stimuli and responses. Operant conditioning is based on voluntary behaviour. The basic feature of operant conditioning is reinforcement. It is described as a process that attempts to modify behaviour through the negative and positive reinforcement, and originated by B.F. Skinner. For instance, a child whom has helped in class or completed all their homework on time may be rewarded with a positive reinforcement such as a certificate or a star on the wall, which will give them a sense of pride and achievement, reinforcing them to continue this behaviour. Other children will see this reward and work harder to gain the positive rewards themselves. Negative reinforcement is all about subtraction and not to be confused with sanctions or punishments. For example, as the class has been working really hard and they have excelled in their listening or classwork, you can decide to take away a spelling test for the afternoon or homework. Therefore, taking something they may not enjoy, they see as a negative, will encourage more hard work and listening, as they remember the last time they behaved that way, they were rewarded with a negative reinforcement. Classical conditioning. Discovered by Ian Pavlov, classical conditioning is a process that occurs with an association of an elemental stimulus and a naturally occurring stimulus. Pavlov's experiments were based on the amount a dog salivated when being fed. He applied a tube inside the dog's mouth to measure the amount of saliva when food is produced. After recording that amount, he introduced an elemental stimulus, such as the signal of a tone, before the food was served. The naturally occurring reflex was salivation. By associating the first elemental stimulus, the tone, with the second elemental stimulus, food, the dogs began to salivate at the sound of the tone rather than only when presented with food. This kind of conditioning can also be linked to school activities such as tests. If students were conditioned to take hard tests in stressful and limited timeframes, they would associate all tests with stress. By partnering this classical conditioning technique with operant conditioning, you may be able to reverse the learned condition of associating stress with exams. This is called extinction. So behaviour which is learned can be unlearned. Now we will look at a short comparison of some other examples of learning theory. Bandura, a social learning theory. Through an experiment known as the Bobo doll, Bandura tested his theory on children mimicking an adult's behaviour after witnessing how they behaved towards a doll. Most of the children who observed the adult being aggressive towards a doll repeated the same behaviour, and those children observing an adult showing kindness to the doll also repeated this behaviour, allowing Bandura's theory that children will mimic and repeat what they see and hear socially. Vygotsky was also interested in the social aspect of children's learning. He argued that Piaget's theory was not as strong due to the cultural and social aspect of the children Piaget observed. Piaget's observations were based on his own middle-class children and family. Vygotsky argued that social learning begins before developmental learning. Vygotsky's theorizes that development differs across cultures, where Piaget's theory is a more universal development across cultures. Vygotsky believes that the environment the children grew up in played a major role in how and what they will learn. In Vygotsky's theory, infants already have the ability for intellectual development. These are the elementary mental functions: attention, sensation, perception, and memory. As a child grows in their socio-cultural environment, these functions develop into higher mental functions. As the child continues to learn, they will develop more with the help from a more knowledgeable other. This may be a parent, a teacher, or a peer. The child will listen and watch and attain the knowledge from an MKO, more knowledgeable other, until they are able to process it confidently and do it themselves. Another theory that describes thought processing is the information process theory, associated with John William Atkinson and Richard Shiffen. The brain is seen as a computer. Information is attained from a stimuli, such as the environment, and input into the mind either as new information or to alter previous information. Then it will be stored either as a short-term memory, a long-term memory, then the output will be using the information when needed. This theory technically is part of every developmental theory. Understanding whether the information comes from experience, a more knowledgeable other, social, cultural, or behavioural stimuli, it will still require inputting, storage, and eventually outputting. Thank you.